Welcome back to Crit and Crit. I'm Axion.
I'm Scint.
And we are back in Castlevania, Circle of the Moon.
Dracula thought he got rid of us, but nope.
And this section, we are looking at The Telltale Hark by Edgar Allan Poe.
Probably actually one of his best-known short stories. Not the go-to I would have gone to for, like, analysis stuff. Like, I prefer the Castle of Amontillado, personally, but Telltale Hark's okay.
I'm sure we'll get to more Poe eventually. I do not like these guys.
It's okay, it seems to be quite mutual. They don't like you either.
Usually don't.
Alright, so we're gonna kind of break with our usual format, and rather than starting off with a recap of the plot, because I'm gonna be honest, the Telltale Heart is really, really short, so we're probably gonna have a really short episode when we get to that. Let's actually talk about Poe himself, because the man was quite influential.
That's probably an understatement.
Oh, I'm sorry, am I doing a Poe job of this? Don't set me up for puns if you don't want them to happen.
What are you talking about? You're gonna do puns anyway.
Yes, but don't deliberately set me up for them. Make me work for it, come on. Anyway, so, Poe was actually orphaned at a very young age. His father had actually left the family when he was very young, and his mother died of tuberculosis when he was 2, so he was taken in by a couple in Richmond named Alan, but they never actually formally adopted him. So, that's probably going to lead to some stress, not knowing what your actual place is forever. Though he did have a pretty comfortable lifestyle, as they were pretty wealthy. So yeah, that's where he gets his full name, Edgar Allan Poe.
I had been curious about that, I admit.
So, despite the fact that he spent his adolescence in a pretty affluent state, he didn't have enough money with him for tuition. He was going to go to the University of Virginia. And, well, he didn't bring enough money, so he thought, what's going to help me get enough money? Gambling.
Oops.
So yeah, he needed about $350. He had about $100. And when he left, he had negative $2,000. So as you might guess, he had some issues with his family after that. And also his the childhood love of his life had married someone else, because her father had gotten a hold of his love letters and was like, no, he's not going to amount to anything. I'm going to steer you towards someone who's not going to be a complete waste. So,
as
just
you do.
Arranged marriage things.
Alright, so what happened next?
He moved to Boston and started writing under a pseudonym, then joined the Army under an assumed name. He went with Edgar Perry rather than Poe. And he actually was pretty good at it. He made Sergeant Major in about 2 years. But he ran into financial issues again and was court-martialed for dereliction of duty, where he moved in with his aunt and her daughter Virginia. This name will be important in a few years for reasons. But he continued writing and published a couple of stories that were actually graphic and horrifying enough to get complaints from readers. So he got a job at the Messenger and moved back to Virginia, where he started running into conflicts with his editor due to, allegedly, his drinking problem. So he invited his aunt and cousin to move in with him, which were kind of a stabilizing effect on him, and he then married Virginia.
Of course he did.
I'm going to make it worse. So he was 27.
Mm-hmm.
She was 13.
Of course.
And so this is where historians cannot agree. There's not a concrete source on what kind of relationship they had. Like, if it was just, okay, we're married for, like, I don't know, tax and inheritance purposes. If they had more of a familiar relationship, it was just something like that. Or if it was actually,
what you would expect when people say marriage.
Yeah, so no one's really sure, but he seems to be a little bit less nutty and more predictable when they were around. This wouldn't last forever, though, because of our old friend tuberculosis.
Oh boy.
But, yeah. So, in 1837, he leaves his job in Richmond, moving to Philadelphia, and this is when he basically writes, like, everything we know him for. Telltale Heart, Mask of the Red Death, The Black Cat, The Pendulum, Fall of the House of Usher, and Murders in the Rue Morgue, which is really important as far as how influential he was for a very particular reason.
That reason being?
So, the main character, or one of the characters, I haven't actually read Rue Morgue, in The Murders in the Rue Morgue, C. Auguste Dupin, is cited by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle as the literary inspiration behind Sherlock Holmes.
That would make sense.
So, can you imagine the literary world without Sherlock Holmes today?
Yes, but it would probably be very different.
Like Sherlock Holmes is like the modern archetype of the detective, and we didn't really have anything as influential in regards to that until Agatha Christie's Poirot and Marple came along. There were other sleuths, but they all seemed to follow like were very similar to Holmes' pattern. In a way, like, I used to read a lot more mysteries than I do now, so it's kind of hard to remember to distinguish them. But it's like, well, someone died and we solved it, okay? And I know that's reductive. Don't at me, but we're not talking about mysteries. We're talking about Poe. But yeah, some of Poe's stuff also veers into like early sci-fi. So I mean, this is not that long after Frankenstein, so the genre is still very much in flux and being developed. But he actually wrote across a whole lot of genres. We just know him best for horror these days. He was one of the first to actually go for, like, psychological horror. The true monster is the capacity for evil, very Lord of the Flies. So, The Raven was actually published not long before he died, and was also not long before his wife died. So Raven is published in 1845, and, well, he didn't make a lot of money from it, but it did give him a lot of opportunities. Like, he actually got paid in exposure in a way for this, because the fact that it was so popular, he got invited to give lectures and such. So he became the first American writer to live completely off of what he earned from writing. Like, it wasn't a great living, but he could completely support himself. And his wife dies 2 years later from tuberculosis. And Poe never really recovered from it. And, well, went back to Richmond, where he grew up. His childhood love, Elmira Shelton, is now a widow, so he starts rekindling that with her, and is actually planning to marry her when weird stuff happens.
Define weird stuff in this context.
Like, people don't know. Like, people actually do not know. So, Poe's last day in Richmond... I'm reading from the Poe Museum for a lot of this information, for sources if you need them. Poe's last day in Richmond was on September 26, 1849. Elmira was worried about his health, because after he recovered from cholera, he'd been in fragile health. So she encouraged him, okay, go to the doctor. And he did, but the doctor was also a friend, so they kind of just chit-chatted. So he left Sadler's Restaurant, and at 4 a.m. on September 27th, Poe boarded a ship headed for Baltimore. From September 27th until October 3rd, there is no record of his whereabouts. But on October 3rd, which they note is an election day, so I'm not sure how that's relevant to the story, but Poe was found delirious in a tavern called Gunner's Hall in Baltimore. He appeared drunk, wearing someone else's clothes, and was taken to Washington University Hospital. For the next 4 days, he was in and out of consciousness, sometimes being alert, sometimes screaming at nothing and no one. And he died 4 days later. The doctor labeled his cause of death as inflammation of the brain, which is basically, we can interpret that in modern days as, we don't know, but we're doctors, so we have to look like we know. So there's actually a lot of historical speculation about the true cause of death for him. According to the Poe Museum, there are 26 published theories on his demise so far. So yeah, when I say weird stuff, I mean I don't know. Inflammation of the murder. And yeah, that's where the story of Edgar Allan Poe, the man, ends, and we just have his writing to work with. And I will say, like, I knew some of this, but the Sherlock Holmes connection was a surprise. I did not see that coming.
Yep. That was definitely a few things I didn't know before.
I'm trying to find the Hark of Vagrant comic that's H.G. Wells writing fan mail to Poe.
Is that a thing that really happened?
Yeah, remember when I said that Poe was kind of a pioneer of early science fiction?
Yeah.
So he's kind of a contemporary of Wells.
Okay.
I'm trying to find something I can actually read that's not locked behind a scholarly journal's paywall.
I was about to say paywall.
Okay, here's some information from a Tor article, which I wouldn't have guessed from the title, which is, Was Poe Steampunk? And the Vandermeer Steampunk anthology, Justin Nibbins credits Poe as one of the mainstream writers who created the American cult of the scientist and the lone inventor. He contributed authenticity and realism to science fiction, used sci-fi pieces as thought experiments, was among the first to focus on the wonders of the great steampunk icon, the balloon and Zeppelin. There is also the fact that steampunk's paterfamilias, Jules Verne and H.G. Wells, were heavily influenced by Poe. Jules Verne read Baudelaire's translations of Poe in various journals and newspapers, and Verne responded chiefly to the apologies, puppy had a dream and scared herself. And Verne responded chiefly to the cleverness, ratiocination, and up-to-date scientific trappings Poe wrapped his stories in. At the core of many Verne works are Poe prototypes. 5 Weeks in a Balloon was influenced by the balloon hoax, and The Unparalleled Adventures of Hans Pfaall, The Sphinx of Snows, is like a sequel to the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket and is dedicated to Poe. Around the World in 80 Days uses the main concept from 3 Sundays in a Week. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea may be the most subtly and heavily Poe-esque in its tone and character. Nemo's silent suffering, deprivation of human convenience paired with immaculate taste and blatant disdain for society all conjure Hans Pfaall, Roderick Usher, and Monsieur Dupin. Poe is so ubiquitous throughout 20,000 Leagues that at the journey's end, the Day's Professor Aronnax describes his adventure as being drawn into that strange region where the foundered imagination of Edgar Poe roamed at will. I'd actually missed that when we read it.
I did too.
Okay, it looks like it was Jules Verne, not H.G. Wells, that was the fan. So I got the comic wrong. It's been a bit since I saw it.
I did that backwards.
H.G. Wells was heavily influenced by Poe's mathematical descriptions of machines and stories such as Maisel's Chess Player and The Pit and the Pendulum, and acknowledged that the fundamental principles of construction and that underlie such stories as Murders in the Rue Morgue are precisely those that should guide a scientific writer. So, yeah, Poe really played a role in early sci-fi. which is really funny considering he's just the horror guy to a lot of us, self-included.
You learn something new every day, I guess.
Yep. And speaking of, I'm not really sure what else I can say without just retreading old ground, or sidetracking into stories that we're not talking about today.
Well then, I think we'll call it an episode here and continue next time with the actual plot of The Telltale Heart. See y'all then.
Bye!